For us to unleash our potential, I think the first step is we've got to believe that we can. We heard a lot about evolving today. We heard a lot about making sure that a car doesn't pass us by, right? That we're the first ones across that finish line. In order to do that, it means we have to evolve, right? It means we have to change and embrace what that means. So what came up for me as I was listening was one of the guys that I worked with for 20 years was John Smoltz. Smoltz was a right-handed pitcher, right, for the Atlanta Braves for a long time. John was a fantastic and is a fantastic human being, a guy that certainly throws a baseball really well, but most importantly, he's a fantastic person. But John was a guy that 10 years into his big league career as a starter, my phone rings. It's the Braves. Hey, listen, Molly, what do you think John would say to the opportunity to become a closer? Do you think he would embrace the opportunity to come in at the end of games and close games out? We know he's old. We know he's had a lot of surgeries. We know he's gotten bone spurs removed. What do you think? What do you think he'd say to that? They said, we don't have anybody in the minor league system that we really think can step up into that role. We don't have anybody on the free agent market that we want to go get that we can drop into that role. John's a veteran. John can handle pressure. John doesn't mind having the ball when the game's on the line. What do you think? I called John. He came up to the office. We sat down. I said, hey, man, this is the deal. What do you think? This was a big change for a guy like Smoltz. Here's a guy that was like a marathon runner, right? He would wake up every day and 4 or 5 days in a row. He'd pitch, and then 4 or 5 days later, he'd pitch again. And then 4 or 5 days later, he'd pitch again. He did that for a decade. And now the organization that he's played for forever is looking at him going, hey, man, we want you to change. We want you to become a closer. We want you to become, in essence, a sprinter overnight. And John was a guy, by the way, that slept in a hyperbaric chamber in between starts so he could maximize oxygen flow to his body. So he could recover faster from adversity, from his body's breaking down at times. He slept in a hyperbaric chamber. I said, John, listen, man, one thing just to know, dude, you're married, okay? So once in a while, make sure you come out of that hyperbaric chamber. You know what I'm saying? He got divorced. I warned him. You know what I mean? I said, I warned you, man. But John looked at this situation, looked at this opportunity, something that he could have absolutely said no to. He didn't need to take the ball. He didn't need to become a closer. He was under contract. He was making a lot of money. He didn't need to make that shift. But you know what? His team needed him to make that shift. The community, the Braves, needed him to make that shift. He believed he could stand on that mound and manage that pressure. He felt like it was the right thing to do. He could see the writing on the wall that if he didn't step into that role, that, gosh, I don't know if we're going to win as many games as a team. So Smoltz said yes to that challenge. He said yes to that opportunity. He said yes to that uncomfortable feeling that often comes when we have to walk inside of change. He said yes. So John comes into the National League for the Braves the very next season as a closer and leads the National League in saves with 55 saves. John went into the Hall of Fame 2 weeks ago, not just as one of the best starters to ever play Major League Baseball, but what? One of the best closers as well. He embraced and believed in his ability to evolve and change. When we embrace that uncomfortable feeling that sometimes comes inside of change, that's when we grow. When we walk right into fear and stay inside of it and walk through it, on the other end of that fear, on the other end of that change, is oftentimes magical growth. Embracing change, embracing those challenges. The first step in doing it is believing that we can. Believing, in fact, that when we walk into a new customer that we can get that piece of business. So we've got to believe that we can. The second piece, when we think about getting even better, when we think about unleashing our potential, when we think about making sure that we're jumping into the very best race car that we could ever jump into each and every day, we've got to discover, I believe, the gaps inside of the customers that we serve, inside of the prospects that we want to bring on board. We've got to discover the gaps inside of their world and then find a way to over-deliver to them. At the core, recruiting athletes for 20 years, my goal was to uncover the gaps in their lives, to try to act like I had the business before I actually had the business. When we act like we have the business before we have the business, we send a message to them of how amazing this relationship could really be. So in 1993, I graduated from Michigan State. I played tennis there, and I wanted to stay in the business of sports. But I really didn't know what that looked like. I was 21 or 22 years old, came from a wonderful family, and as I was looking at my parents, I said, listen, I want to be in the sports marketing business, but geez, there's not a lot of opportunity in my hometown of Lansing, Michigan. I said, I think I'm going to move to Atlanta because the Super Bowl's coming, the Olympics is coming, there's a lot of agencies in Atlanta. I said, I think I'm going to try to save a little bit of money and go down there and look for a job. So I taught tennis in Lansing that summer, made about $2,000. Put that $2,000 in cash in my pocket, went down into my mom's closet and borrowed like a polyester, awful, gross blue business suit. I said, I'm going to take that down, right, just in case maybe I get an opportunity in a meeting. So I get my Honda Accord at the end of the summer with $2,000, my mountain bike, a suit from my mom, right? And I think, geez, man, I hope this works. I go 75 south, and my parents, as I'm pulling out of the driveway, think, well, this will be kind of interesting, won't it, honey? She'll be back in, 2 weeks tops, right? So I get down to Atlanta, and a girlfriend of mine from high school was great, and she lived down there, and she had a job in sports, and she said, listen, you can live with me for a couple weeks, but you're going to need to find a place to live, because I'm living in a little 600-square-foot apartment, so you're going to need to find a place. And I said, well, listen, if I can just live with you for a couple weeks until I can find a place and maybe find a job, that'd be awesome. So I get down there, and I sleep on the floor of her apartment, and my tennis coach from college was amazing, and she gave me 3 names of 3 people in Atlanta that taught tennis for a living. And she said, look, I know you don't want to be a teaching pro. I know you don't want to teach tennis for a living. But why don't you call these people and see if they'll give you some help, give you some advice? And I always believe that sometimes in life when we ask for advice, we get a job. But when we ask for a job, we get advice. I think the same thing's true in business, by the way. Sometimes in business, with a prospect, when we ask for advice, we might end up with the business. Sometimes when we ask for the business, we just end up with advice. So I wake up that very first morning in Atlanta, and I pick up the landline, right, and I call this one tennis pro. And we get to kind of talking. He was a really good guy. And I said, hey, man, listen, tell me about the sports space in Atlanta, and I'd love to get some advice from you on how to break into this space. So we start talking. We kind of connect. I'm asking a lot of questions. And then all of a sudden he says, Molly, I don't know if you know this, but in Atlanta, tennis is a really big deal. He said, in fact, people will teach tennis at an apartment complex for a little bit off the rent. And I said, what do you mean? He said, like the apartment complex has a tennis court. They teach tennis there, and they give them a little bit off the rent. And I said, geez, man, I only got $2,000, right? This would be sweet, right? This would allow me to maybe stay in Atlanta a little bit longer or look for the right job. He said, in fact, there's an amazing apartment complex, great location. He said, and the pro there, the tennis pro, is leaving. He said, but I don't think he's told the manager that he's leaving yet. He goes, you should go over there and introduce yourself to the manager and see, what's going on with that. I said, great. So I get in my car. I drive over to this property. I walked into the apartment complex manager. I said, hey, how are you? I'm Molly. I played tennis, taught a little bit. I said, I see you have a court. I said, do you, use that court to teach tennis to your residents? And she said, oh, yeah, we do. It's amazing. We have a lot of people that come out to the clinic. We have a pro. He's been with us for 6 years. He's amazing. Everybody loves him. And I said, oh, wow, cool. She said, yeah, he's a computer programmer during the day. And then on Tuesday night, he teaches to anybody that wants to come for like an hour and a half. And I said, oh, wow, cool. I said, well, listen, if anything changes, with him, I said, let me know, man, because I would love to talk to you about teaching tennis here. And before I had left, I made these horrible bootleg, right, super unprofessional business cards. And I gave her this business card just because I, wanted to sort of act like I was a grown-up. And I said, well, here's my card. And if anything changes, let me know. And she said, oh, yeah, no, we're good. I appreciate it, though, but we're all set. I said, okay, cool. So I get in my car. I drive out. And as I'm driving across the street, I see this little local pizza place called Pero's Pizza. I see this little local place. It's clearly kind of a local joint, right? So I think to myself, geez, man, I wonder if that pizza place sells a lot of pizza to that apartment complex right across the street, because it's like a 9-iron, right, across the street. I said, geez, I mean, they should be just driving pizzas back and forth all day, right? I mean, 1,100 units over there, they should be just killing it. So I think, well, what the heck? So I pull up, I walk into Pero's. I said, is Mr. or Mrs. Pero here. Thinking that was kind of a safe bet, right? So out comes Charlie Pero. I said, Mr. Pero? He said, yes. I said, and I'm just curious. I said, by chance, do you sell a lot of pizza to that apartment complex right across the street? You know, it's right there. They've got like 1,100 units, and I'm just curious if you sell a lot of pizza over there. And he kind of looks at his wife who had walked out, and he said, I don't know, honey, do we? And she said, you know, not a lot. And he kind of looks at her, and he goes, God, right? I mean, it's right there. I said, yeah, man. I mean, you should be just driving back and forth all day, killing it. I mean, it's right there, 1,100 units. And he goes, yeah, absolutely. I said, well, what if we did something where, I don't know, you know, once a month, you gave me like 20 free pizzas. And in exchange for those pizzas, I could give them to the residents that come to the tennis clinic on Tuesday nights, right? You could give it to me once a month, no big deal. I said, and maybe you could give me a coupon or something, and I could put that coupon in the newsletter that the residents get at the beginning of the month. He goes, wow, like 15, 20 free pizzas, and then you'll put a coupon once a month in their newsletter? I said, yeah. He said, wow, that'd be amazing. I'd love it. No question. I'm done. Deal. I said, okay, but Mr. Pero, the thing is, I said, I don't have a deal over there yet. I'm really close, though, okay? So just hang tight, right, and I'll be back. I said, so just keep it right here, you know, between me and you. Okay, I got this. So I get in my car. I drive back over to my friend's apartment. I call my buddies at Wilson Sporting Goods who gave me tennis rackets in college. I said, hey, man, I need you to do me a huge favor. You got a closet of goodies, don't you? Like tennis rackets, T-shirts, keychains, whatever. He goes, yeah. I go, can you do me a huge favor and put a box of goodies together, right, Wilson stuff, send it down to me. I'm trying to get this deal to teach tennis. I said, I want to show this manager, right, some of the stuff that we maybe could do. I said, we could use these prizes and give them away to the people that come to the clinics. He goes, yeah, Don, I'm walking into a meeting. I'll take care of it later this week. It'll be there next week. I said, Rick, yeah, so the thing is, man, I need it, you know, tomorrow. He goes, what? I said, I mean, afternoon delivery on FedEx, afternoon delivery's fine, but I need it tomorrow. And he goes, geez. And I said, yeah, man, please, it'd be huge, right? And he goes, oh, my gosh. He goes, done. He said, I'll do it, no problem. So the next morning, I wake up, I go to Kinko's, my favorite place because I have no job, right? So I go to Kinko's, and I print these little tips I'd written for a little local magazine in Lansing, these little tennis tips, right? Probably very poorly written tips. And I think, you know, we could put these tips in the newsletter to inspire people to come to the tennis clinic, or if people are thinking about moving in, right, they could read this, get excited, come to the clinic, maybe, you know, then lease an apartment. So I print all that stuff. 1 o'clock, my box of stuff comes in, right? I get my box. I get my little tennis tips. I go back over to the property. I walked in with my box, and I said, hey, how are you? You know, I'm Molly. I was here the other day, right? I just wanted to swing back by. I got some. She interrupts me, and she goes, oh, my gosh. She said, you are not going to believe this. I said, what? She goes, you aren't going to believe this. She said, our tennis pro came in here this morning. He's getting married and moving out. She said, we need a pro. I said, no. I'm like, you got to be kidding me, man. This is amazing, right? I said, I was just coming by to drop off this stuff from Wilson, and these are some tips I'd written for a little magazine in Lansing. And she goes, well, this is great. I said, yeah. I said, this is great. So how did it work with a pro? Like, what was the deal? She said, well, every Tuesday night he'd teach tennis for an hour and a half, you know, to anybody that came. I said, cool. She said he was a computer programmer during the day. He had a sort of regular job, and then he would just do this on the side. I said, cool. And so what do you, kind of how'd that work financially? She said, well, we gave him $500 off the rent every month. How much is the rent? $850. She said, so he would just write us a check for $350 at the beginning of every month. And I said, oh, wow, that's great. I said, well, listen, there's this restaurant nearby. I said, these guys are great. I said, they'll hook us up with free pizzas, you know, once a month maybe, you know, and we could give those pizzas to the people that come to the tennis clinics. And these guys at Wilson are great. And, you know, these tips we could put in the newsletter. And maybe for these pizza guys, right, I could put a coupon in the newsletter. I'll come down here and stuff them for you. And she said, man, that's great. That'd be great. She said, our guy didn't do any of that kind of stuff. I said, yeah, no, this is great. I said, you know, the 850, 500, 350 thing, you know, why don't we just waive it, you know? I mean, let's just waive it. I mean, it's cleaner, you know, it's easier. She's like, what? I said, yeah, let's just waive it. I'll move in. We keep the momentum going, you know, from the program. And she goes, well, geez, I got to go call my boss. And I said, yeah, no, I'm good. I have no job. I'll wait, right? So she goes walking back. She comes back 5 minutes later, and she goes, you're not going to believe this. She said, I told him about the pizza and the Wilson stuff and the tips and the coupons and everything. She said, good to go. You're done. We'd love for you to move in as soon as possible. I lived in that little apartment complex, in that little 600 square foot apartment for 9 years for free. It was unbelievable, right? There was this one cute couple that came to the clinic. They met, they got married, they moved out. 3 years later, sadly, they got divorced. So one night I'm riding up in the elevator, and the gentleman's riding up with me, and he goes, you're the tennis pro here, aren't you? And I said, yeah. He goes, man, how long have you been living here? And I go, yeah, kind of a while, man. I mean, and he goes, geez, you need to buy something. I mean, you're just throwing money down the drain in here. And I go, I know, right? It's crazy. I mean, I know. But I tell that story because to me in life, that's really what we all do each and every day. If we can act like we have the business before we have the business, if we can demonstrate to somebody what this relationship will look like, what it will feel like, we can send a message to them that, gosh, how could I not? How could I not do business with this person? How could I not sit beside this person as they're trying to help make my world even better? When we make sure that at the core we connect with the people that we work with and want to work with, not just communicate, that's when we get deals done. That's when we get business done. When we make sure that we're relational in nature versus transactional in nature, that's when we connect. That's when we truly own each of our neighborhoods. It's about connection, not just communication. It's about making sure that we identify the gaps in their world. Sometimes those are gaps that maybe they haven't even thought of themselves. Sometimes those gaps too, and providing value inside of those gaps isn't expensive at all. Doing those things cost really no money to add value to her world. I would challenge you to identify the people that you don't have as business now and say to yourself, what are the gaps in their world? What are the gaps in their world, and how can I begin to act like they're a customer before they're a customer? How can I bring them into the fold and make them feel what this relationship looks like before it's actually really there? When we think about discovery, I think it's about discovering the gaps externally. But I think it's also about pulling back and having the courage, having the vulnerability to discover the gaps inside of ourselves too, inside of our teams, having the courage to say, what could I do even better? Kevin Durant is a guy that plays in the NBA, right? A guy that's had great success. A guy that the world would look at and say, man, you've got it. You're there. You're making a bunch of money. You're a stud. You've been MVP. You've won. I mean, you're unbelievable. You've arrived. There are no gaps, Kevin. You've made it. But Kevin pulled back and he said, no, because I know I can get better. So Kevin hired a young kid, a real bright young kid, and he said, listen, I want you to be my analytics guy. I want you to follow me to every practice, every game. I want to meet with you after each and every practice and each and every game, and I want you to tell me my gaps. The kid went to every practice and charted everything. Helped Kevin understand all the stats just from practice on where he was missing, how he was moving, what was working on the right side, the left side, even from a defensive perspective. So Kevin took all that data and would use that and take it into games. And then at the end of games, after games, he would go up to his hotel room with Justin, his analytics kid, and he would sit with Justin and listen to the data and the analytics and try to look at what those gaps were so that the next day he could get even better. And trust me, most NBA guys aren't in their hotel room after an NBA game with an analytics kid, right? He wasn't afraid to dig in and say, how can I get better? Having the courage inside of our own businesses to look at ourselves and say, what can I do even better? What's a gap inside of myself? So that we can pull back and take that data, take that information, and have the courage to make a shift. Discovering those gaps both externally and internally, to me, is key to our success. Thank you. Thank you. You guys are awesome. Thank you.